she mentioned the boxes. Now, I thought she was kidding, but she was dead serious.
Okay.
I had to prepare dinner each day, dump half in the garbage disposal, and eat the rest right away. She seemed so nonchalant about it, but I wasn't. Who was sending them? Why? What would happen if I refused? She had no solid answers. All she knew was what the previous tenant had told her, which is what they were told by the previous tenant, and so on. Origins unknown. Even the landlord had no idea this was going on, and Lita stressed that I must never tell him. She also stressed that I must never refuse. Why? She said protection, claiming that for as long as she'd lived here, the apartment was never robbed. Was she seriously insinuating that this stupid requirement protected her? She shrugged and said anything was possible. She didn't question the absurdity of it all, but she did question my reluctance. She assured me that she'd eaten from the boxes every day for the year that she lived here, and they were legit. No prank, no poison, no strings attached. Just dump half in the garbage disposal and eat the rest right away. She began listing the various meals that she'd prepared, and my empty stomach growled. I hadn't had a decent meal in days. It didn't take me long before I caved. Now, after a month of delicious food, my unease was ebbed, but not my disdain. After I turned off the garbage disposal, I grabbed the remaining chicken and spinach tortellini and I plopped down onto the floor, eating my only meal today. Despite licking the plate clean, my stomach still complained, and I glared at the sink. Half a portion wasn't enough, and I was sick of wasting part of a perfectly good meal. One that I'd worked hard on, no less. I was done following these ridiculous rules. Tomorrow, I was going to eat the entire thing. And I did. For the next week, I prepared and ate the whole meal, and nothing happened. I'll admit, I was nervous the first few days, but when the world didn't collapse and the boxes kept coming, I felt pretty clever for being the first to break this ridiculous and wasteful trend. As long as food kept getting delivered right to my door, I was going to eat it. I was going to eat all of it. 8 days later, I realized my actions should have killed me. My bladder woke me up that night, and I shambled to the bathroom. After washing my hands, I made my way back to my sleeping bag, and I frowned at an unusual draft. Before I could figure out where it was coming from, a startling force knocked me to the ground. My heart leapt to my throat, and it probably would have jumped out of my mouth if there wasn't a hand smothering my scream. The stench of sweat filled my lungs as I struggled beneath a bony weight, my panicked thoughts flashing horrifying scenarios through my mind. A sharp hiss for silence pierced my ears as the cold metal of a gun pressed against my temple. And I abided. Trembling, face down on the floor, I held my breath, my eyes wide in fearful anticipation as I heard my attacker grunting and rummaging. I turned my gaze to the open window and I cursed myself for not propping the broomstick properly as I saw it lying on the floor. In no time, the intruder had shoved a filthy rag in my mouth and yanked my arm behind my back, binding them before he lashed my ankles together. Only then did he take his weight off of me and flip me over, sunken eyes wild under a mess of hair. He's definitely on something. It was frightening. His actions had no hesitation. He came here for something, and he wasn't leaving without it. Question was, what? That mystery didn't last long as he demanded to know where I hid my valuables. I stared at him in disbelief. Did he not see the squalor I was living in? I didn't even have furniture. Did he think I had cash stuffed in my frayed sleeping bag? Gold hidden in my rusty oven? Diamonds stashed behind my broken radiator? My baffled silence wasn't the answer he was looking for, and I cried out as he punched me in the face. He lifted his fist again, and I flinched, whimpering through my gag as I nodded towards my meager possessions, my wallet and my phone. He crawled over to them, and I crawled away, tears stinging my eyes as my cheek throbbed to the rhythm of a shuddering heart. I was certain $11.25 and a phone with a cracked screen wouldn't be enough to appease him. He seemed desperate enough to kill. I had to save myself before it was too late. As he tore through my wallet in frustration, I made my way to the kitchen. my eyes on the drawers. I just needed a knife to cut through these bonds, and I could make a run for it. Balancing on my knees, I bent over and I reached up with my hands, my trembling fingers searching for the handle, gripping it. I pulled, but it didn't move. It's the worst time for it to stick. I wiggled it as I always do, but my position was less than optimal and the drawer refused to budge. After a particularly forceful yank, I lost my balance and I fell with a grunt. My terrified eyes turned towards the door as the intruder stomped in, gun aimed at me. I screamed and cowered against the cupboards, my heart slamming against my ribcage as the blood drained from my face. And then, the blood drained from his face. I followed his petrified gaze, and I screamed even louder as an unholy creature erupted from the sink. It towered over us like a giant furry centipede, pointy legs bristling from its long, inky body and spikes jutting out of its mouth. With a lurching motion, looking almost as though it was falling, it descended upon the intruder, silencing his screams with a stabbing straight through his throat. It didn't silence my screams, though. And I continued to shriek through the gag as the monster continued to stab the man, his sharp legs jabbing at him like a macabre typewriter. It was facing away, but that didn't stop the spraying blood from dotting every surface of the kitchen, including me. After a final few jabs, the monster stopped puncturing the intruder, and I watched in horror as it began sliding the mutilated body into its mouth, its legs tapping against the cracked tiles with excitement as though this was the first meal in ages. It devoured its kill the way a snake would, completely whole, and vomit fought my screams as it burned my throat. Once the last of the man disappeared, the creature gulped a few times and began spasming. For a few moments I thought it was choking and dying, but to my terrified dismay, I realized it was crushing the body within its own, as I heard bones snap and grind. Its convulsing stopped, and shock stole my screams as I watched its sharp legs retract into its blood-soaked fur. It now looked more like a giant fluffy caterpillar than a centipede, and my raspy breaths raced my pulse as I fearfully waited to see what it would do next. I stared in fraught disbelief as the monster began slithering across the floor, lapping up every last drop of blood it came across before it stretched itself to reach the counters, the walls, the ceiling. It was a lot more coordinated after eating, and that amplified my unease. Soon, only my corner was left, and it turned to me, giving me my first clear view of its face. It wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined pincers, antennae, compound eyes, but instead I saw a rounded snout, floppy ears, and deep scars where its eyes should be. I mean, in any other scenario, it might pass for cute, but right now, all it did was reboot my vocal cords as it slithered closer. My muffled screams echoed as I pressed myself against the cupboards, petrified, but it didn't seem to care as it licked up the blood around me. And when it began licking me, my heart almost stopped beating right then and there, as I was certain I was next on the menu. And then it nuzzled me. I peeked through my eyelids, gulping, and I frowned in uneasy confusion as it curled up beside me, laying its large head on my lap. Slowly I allowed my screams to stop, my tense body quivering with adrenaline. It had murdered my attacker, cleaned up the crime scene, and now it was snuggling. A knock on the door startled us as my neighbors asked if I was all right, and I gasped, afraid the monster would go after them. To my surprise, it shrank away instead, slithering towards the sink and stretching itself thin before wriggling down the drain. The door crashed open, and my neighbors ran in, the look on their faces matching mine as they saw me bound in the corner, quaking with shock, and after that, they freed me, and I found my voice. I mentioned the robber, but I gave him a happier ending as I claimed he ran away. As much as the creature terrified me, it saved my life. I didn't want to get it in trouble. Besides, who would believe me? Maybe Lita would. I decided to call her in the morning, but that left me up all night thinking, was that creature the thing that we'd been feeding all this time? Was Lita right? Was it here to protect us? Was it too weak to scare off the robber before he attacked me because I'd unintentionally starved it over a week? And despite all that, did it care for me that much that it didn't eat me? It saved my life and it snuggled? I hope that was the case. The creature didn't seem malevolent towards me, but there were still many unanswered questions and uncertainties, and I hope Lita would answer them. She couldn't. I mean, I didn't mention the monster right away, afraid that she'd be clueless and think I was insane. Instead, I asked if she knew what was protecting us, and if anything unusual slithered out of the kitchen sink. She said our daily ritual protected us, a modern version of ancient sacrifices to the gods, and then she suggested that I ask the landlord to fix my past issues. I still have no answers. Too poor to leave the apartment, not willing to tempt fate. I decided to continue dumping half the meal in the garbage disposal. If that creature was going to protect me, I'd have to stay on its good side. Next day, I carried the box to the kitchen, pinned the recipe in my fridge, began preparing a spicy salmon pizza, keeping a wary eye on the sink. As I turned to the recipe, running my fingers down the instructions, it slipped from beyond the magnet and fell to the floor. This happened every once in a while, but this time, the glossy paper disappeared beneath the fridge. Now, not willing to stick my hand under there, I grabbed the wire coat hanger, stretched it out, and began fishing. I received a medley of cereal crumbs, fossilized chicken wing, a pen cap, a used car salesman business card, 2 dead roaches, my recipe, and a strange yellowed paper. Curious, I dusted it off and read it, my eyes expanding with every word. December 11th, 2013. Dear Tenant, I moved into this apartment to care for my savior. I was a hunter, you see, and I had terminal cancer. I was reckless, and I didn't care when death would choose to take me. But Alesta cared. She protected me when I challenged a bear, appearing out of the blue and nearly dying herself. No one had ever done for me what she did, and I was moved by her selflessness. Alesta got injured and lost her eyesight. She was no longer able to hunt, and I felt responsible. I invited her to live with me. With the last of my savings, I signed up for 10 years of a meal prep program. I know I won't live that long. She may not either, but I still ask you, dear tenant, to continue honoring her. Every evening, prepare the meal and leave it in the cupboard under the sink. Then go to sleep. The next morning, if the plate is still full, do with it as you wish. If the plate is empty, don't be alarmed, just continue to honor my savior, and you'll be safe and secure as long as you live here. Dear tenant, this is all that I ask of you, fulfilling a grateful man's dying wish. Please don't mention this to anyone, especially not the landlord, but if you end up moving out, please hand this letter to the next tenant. And when the 10 years are up, on December 11th, 2023, please, my friend, consider renewing. Alesta deserves it. Thank you, and be blessed. I put the letter down, stunned. The creature truly was a protector, Alesta, brought here to be cared for by a man with little time. Callum put a lot of faith in a bunch of strangers, but I guess he didn't have a choice. He could have at least told us what we were dealing with, but maybe he didn't trust that we'd have Alesta's best interest at heart. I was surprised that we'd all followed the rules despite how cryptic it was. Well, at least until I came along. They looked at the letter again. Would I have been more inclined to abide if I had received this? I mean, I'll never know, because one of the previous tenants misplaced it and passed on the message verbally, the request changing from person to person like a game of telephone, until we were feeding Alesta half her intended meal through the garbage disposal. That wasn't going to happen anymore. I didn't want Alesta to hide anymore either. She saved my life, and I wanted to improve hers. After preparing the spicy salmon pizza, I placed it on the kitchen floor and sat cross-legged in front of it. Working up the courage, I cleared my throat and called out her name. Alesta? A soft gurgle sounded from the drain. Alesta, dinner. Food. Yummy food. I'd never met a creature like Alesta before, and I had no idea how intelligent she was. Come out, it's okay. You don't have to eat in the drain anymore. You can live out here. With me. I held my breath as she poked her head out of the sink, her nose sniffing the air. Hey, Alesta. She gurgled again. She seemed to like hearing her name. The one her only friend had given her. Well, now she had another friend. I gestured to the pizza and smiled before I remembered she couldn't see. This pizza's all for you. I looked down with regret. Sorry I didn't feed you last week. I'll never do that again. I couldn't help but tense up as she slithered over, her long, slender body compressing into a bulbous form as she settled in front of me. This is going to take some getting used to. She smelled like rust and old lettuce. I hope she wasn't averse to baths now that she didn't have to hide anymore. Two pointy legs protruded from her fur, and they poked around blindly until they found the plate. I watched in surprise as she split the pizza and slid half over to me, and I pushed it back. No, it's all for you, like Callum wanted. As I said that, my stomach growled, and Alesta chirped in response and slid half towards me again. She picked up a slice and began nibbling, and I smiled, teary-eyed as I reached out for my own slice. For the first time ever, I was glad that I'd lost my job. But once I got a new one, neither of us would ever go hungry again. Recently, my little brother got into hunting. The woods and camping were never something I ever enjoyed. I was more of an under a pile of blankets with a book kind of guy. I wanted to support him in his new hobby, so I found myself saying that I would go with him and his wife on a weekend hunting trip. The day before we met, felt a small cold coming on. By the time we got our camp set up and went into the woods to start hunting, I had a fever. My face flushed, the gray, rainy weather doing nothing to help it. My brother lent me a rifle, even though I'd never used one before, and I decided early on that I was not going to shoot anything. The head cold was a good excuse to do so. I was against a tree, sniffling, feeling the effects of my fever when my brother shot something. I heard his wife gasp after something big in the distance thudded to the ground, and when I looked over at them both, I realized something was very wrong. Their faces pale and in shock of what had just happened. At first I was convinced my brother accidentally shot someone. I looked off through the trees trying to see what had collapsed. Spotting a white shape through the bush, I started forward, ready to help while the other two remained frozen to the spot. I arrived first to look at what my brother had killed. To my relief, it was a deer. Pure white. Stood in awe of the beautiful coat of fur. I'd never seen a white deer before, and a pang of pain came to my chest over the fact that it was dead. Finally, my brother and his wife walked over, still pale. What is that? He asked in a hushed tone. I looked at him confused about the question for a few seconds. It was a deer. How could he not see that? Looking over to it, I studied it again, trying to see what he meant. When my eyes landed on the deer's face, I finally started to understand the gravity of the situation. See, I know it had antlers, but for the life of me, I can't remember what the face looked like. My memory was a blur of white. While staring right at it, my brain refused to actually see it. I took a few steps back then, scared out of my mind, and started thinking my fever was messing with my head. It doesn't make any sense, I said in a low voice between coughs. The deer in front of us was special. Beyond special. My brother shot it. I looked at the wound that killed the poor thing to see pearl-shaded blood staining the wounds. My stomach twisted in regret, and I felt like I was about to sob. I turned my head away, unable to keep looking at it. What should we do? His wife Kathy asked in a shaking voice. We shouldn't let the meat go to waste, my brother commented. I felt the entire forest fell still at his comment. It was as if the air itself stopped moving. It revolted me. It was terrible enough this creature was dead and my brother wanted to disrespect it further. I knew it was natural for animals to eat each other, and logically, it would be a waste to not eat this deer. However, I just instinctively knew this creature was never meant to be eaten. It was something that existed outside of the natural order, something powerful and yet fragile enough to be killed by a single bullet. Are you crazy? I hissed at him. Looking down at the white shape, I shook my feverish head. We'll let the forest take it. He reluctantly agreed. I put down the borrowed rifle and started to pick up fallen branches, my brother doing the same. Kathy gathered up wildflowers, and in a short while we covered the deer as a sign of respect. We could never take back killing it, but we could show remorse. Without a word, we left the creature behind, and with a heavy weight in our chests. When we arrived back in the camp, I was feeling so ill, I turned in the moment we got back. I bundled myself up in blankets and fell into a deep sleep, only waking to drink some water to ease my dry throat. My slight cough turned into a full-blown flu, and I was in no condition to walk out in the woods. When I woke again, it was morning, but still gray and cold. How are you feeling? Kathy asked me when I came out of my tent. Awful. What's the plan? I felt like my head was going to explode and my entire body was weak. She walked over and gave me a cup of hot tea, which was very much appreciated. We stick around until you feel better and the weather clears up. We should get you out of these woods, but it would nearly kill you if we walked through the rain to get to the truck. Stay inside your tent, keep warm and dry. You brought some books, right? I nodded, sipping at the tea. That sounded like a good enough plan. I hoped my fever would only last another day and we could leave. What happened the day before really was freaking me out. The forest around us felt hostile. The wind howled through the trees and I suppressed a shudder. I took my tea back inside the tent and got wrapped up in blankets once more, but not feeling any warmer. The wind kept howling outside the tent. I prayed my flimsy tent would hold if a storm came rolling in. The rest of the day I drifted between trying to read and sleeping. I normally never felt sick, so it was hitting me extra hard. When Kathy tried waking me up to eat some soup, I was in such a deep sleep that I didn't even stir, so she left me alone to offer it later. The next day I was feeling much better and starving from not eating much the past 2 days. I had my backpack in my tent, so I opened it to find the hidden snack I'd stashed away. I ate an entire box of oatmeal bars before getting outside of my tent. When I went outside, the rain cleared up, but everything else was still damp. Kathy was outside trying to keep the fire going. Feeling any better? She asked me, looking and sounding exhausted. Yeah, a bit. I think we could leave sometime today if it doesn't start raining again, I offered. She looked between me and her tent, worried. Clearing her throat, she shook her head. James isn't feeling well. I think he caught your cold. Let's see how he is in a few hours. I felt bad that my brother was sick, now suffering through what I just did.
Hey Ian, how are you? I've asked, what are you listening to? I am listening to Mr. Creepypasta's January 22
I'll check on him in a few
Creepypasta
hours.
compilation.
Kathy gave me a grateful smile. From how bad she looked, I wondered if she'd gotten sick too.
Sorry, I kind of zoned out there for a while, huh?
Woods, trying my best to find anything that wasn't too damp to burn. I found some sticks hidden under leaves and logs.
Sorry.
Enough. I was the type to get lost easy, so I needed to stick around the camp. After I collected an armful of good enough wood, I was about ready to
I got in the doodle zone, so I was just like, yeah.
On a bush was a few drips of shimmering liquid. I walked up to it to get a better look, not understanding what I was looking at. I was drawn away by the sound of retching off towards the camp. Forgetting about the strange liquid, I started back to check up on my brother and Kathy. When I arrived back, the rain started again, making it too wet for us to start the fire back up. Kathy was looking pale and chilled down to the bone. I wish the cold, damp weather would pass so that we could finally leave. I started to wonder if I should take my brother's truck and maybe get some help. My fever hadn't gone down entirely, and We parked so far away, I feared that I would get too ill if I braved the hike through the woods. Hey, is everything all right? I asked. I put the wood away, covering it with
Paper is
plastic,
back.
hoping for it to stay dry. Kathy looked at me, a worried expression on her face. Before she could answer, my brother came out of his tent. Should have been impossible, but he looked paler than Kathy. His skin nearly void of any color. I decided then that I would try to get some help. We needed to get the hell out of the woods. Hey, James, give me your keys, please, I said, holding on my hand for him to give me his truck keys from his pocket. He looked over at me as if I was speaking a different language. Shaking his head, he took a sip of water from a flask that Kathy handed to him. She looked scared
I
stiff.
detected nerds. Oh no.
James felt different. It's the way he was moving, not really looking at us. No, just give me another few hours to sleep, then we'll all go. I never should have given in. I slowly brought my hand back, trying to think of an argument. Truthfully, I was frightened to go into the woods alone. Just a few more hours, then we wouldn't even pack up our gear. We would just leave. James took Kathy's hand, and they went back into their tent. Not being able to think of anything else to do, I went back into mine to get dry and warm.
What the hell is that? Oh god.
I was going to finish the last 100 pages of a book to give my brother time to sleep. I drifted off while I was reading. One moment I had a book in my hand, and the other, I was waking up in a pitch darkness. I sat up confused at what time it was. Slowly my eyes adjusted, and I could see a hint of light coming through the tent. Slipping back into the cold, damp outside world, I looked over to see a very weak fire burning. My brother stood just within the
You
light.
remind me of the
I opened my
puppet.
mouth to call out to him, but something felt wrong. I couldn't place it. The air was tense. My stomach muscles started to lock up. Hearing me coming from my tent, my brother turned to look at me. He still looked pale as death. His face was the same. But I just knew in that moment I was no longer looking at my brother. He took steps towards me, an unknown purpose in his stride. I ran. Without any plan, I ran off into the woods, trying to get away from whatever he had become. I was only running for a few minutes when I saw the lights of a fire between the trees. It was faint, but I ran towards it, praying someone would help. I didn't think anyone was camping so close to us, and was thankful for it. I ran into the clearing, but my blood froze in my veins. It wasn't a new campsite. It was ours.
Bring
I
cuddle
just ran back,
child.
and even though I was
What?
positive I ran straight, my brother stood by the dying coals, the orange light shining in his eyes. I ran again. It was dark in the woods.
I'm
Was
being
just a
oh.
maze of trees. It was
Then tell him to move.
understandable that I got turned around. A few more minutes of running, and I came crashing into our campsite again. In a blind panic, I just kept going. No matter what direction I took, I would always end up running towards our camp. My brother standing, silently watching me, attempting and failing to escape. When I couldn't run anymore, I collapsed, gasping for air. I didn't understand what was going on. All I knew was I could no longer leave. Please, I begged the pale figure. It was too late to
Healing on my love handle
on
on your. He said cuddle.
Leave. His face was going out of focus. For whatever reason, my brain was refusing to see what it truly looked like. Let me and Kathy leave. I sat on the cold ground, shaking in fear. Deep down, I knew my brother
Probably
wasn't
cold.
changing
Oh
into
no.
something beyond my understanding simply because he shot a strange deer. My suspicions, I couldn't bear to say out loud, was confirmed by him.
Getting chilly.
When he finally spoke in a raspy voice.
That's good. It was really hot last night.
Go. After all, she ate some of it too. My stomach sank, and I felt like I was going to be sick. Killing the white deer by accident could be forgiven, but cutting into its body to devour the flesh could not. The thing that was once my brother lunged at me. He grabbed me by the neck as I struggled desperately to get free. I got as far as the dying fire pile before he held me still, his strength far beyond my own. I kicked, I screamed, trying to pry him away from me. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I saw his mouth. Oh God, whatever he became was something no human should ever see. It opened wide, with countless teeth shining in the dying firelight.
Yeah, it's the tentacle loves.
Because of his unforgivable sin. I was only saved because I thought for a brief moment I saw a white figure behind my brother, urging me to fight. I had nothing to lose. I reached over to the nearby coals, the fear causing me to ignore the pain of grabbing coals and ash to toss into the creature's face. He let out a scream of pain and let me go. I wasted no time scrambling free, but paused at the edge of the camp. I watched in horrified fascination as the thing that was once
You
my
have to
brother
accept that you
screamed
made
and
them.
thrashed.
I said,
Sickening
"Aw."
cracking sounds
I
coming
didn't
from his
say
body as he
no.
started to turn from human
The other
into
tentacle I did
something
not
completely
make.
different. Twisted with long, pale limbs,
I do not have to accept that tentacle.
I couldn't.
Oh no, the thick.
I almost couldn't stand the idea of leaving Kathy behind. She was either already dead or turning into the same thing. Inside of the tent and out of sight.
Oh no, no hitting. Not that nice.
I knew if I left, I would end up back in the camp again. Off in the distance, I saw a hint of white through the trees, and I ran toward it. As I ran, I heard the monster I left behind screaming at me to stay. This time, instead of looping back around, I noticed a hint of shimmering liquid on the ground, and I followed it. Drop by drop, I kept going until my lungs felt like they were going to burst, and my legs burned. The force around me started to get lighter, until I found myself running right into a snow-covered parking lot. I collapsed again, feeling weak, and the snow soaked through my jeans. It wasn't the season for snow. The parking lot was right next to the ranger station, and when I came running out exhausted, the ranger saw me and came outside to see what was going on. I couldn't keep myself awake until he got to me, and I passed out in the slush. In the end, they never found James and Kathy. They found our abandoned campsite months ago and assumed us all dead. I could never tell them what really happened because I don't know myself. I don't feel as if this was all a dream or if my mind just snapped. I'm certain my brother's now something else out there inside the woods. I wonder why I was saved. What creature decided to show me the right way out? Was it the white deer because I didn't eat part of it? Or did it want me to live so that I could tell others about what happened? Whatever reason it might be, I'm thankful for my life. And if you're ever out there hunting, make certain you know what you're about to shoot before you pull the trigger, or else you'll make a mistake that's going to change your life forever. Entry 1. I've decided to keep this journal until I'm saved.
Excuse me.
Today is Monday, 8/25/2014. I'm currently stationed on the USS Kentucky as a Navy seaman, or it was, as the ship has sunk. I don't know the reason why it went under. My officer gave me duty below deck. As I was doing a quick inventory of the supplies in one of the storage rooms, there's a loud crash of some sort, and the ship shook violently. I was trapped under a closet that fell over during the crash, and the door closed itself, the automatic lock activating. Being trapped under a closet, in all honesty, I was slightly panicking. Alarms are going off. This wasn't how I imagined my morning going. I knew being stationed on the ship was bad news since I received my orders, but what I heard, champagne bottle didn't even break during the christening, which means bad luck. No amount of successful missions could have convinced me otherwise. I hate being right. The crash happened a few hours ago, but the ship's going down fast. I haven't been able to unlock the door from the inside, so for now, I'm trapped. Some of the flooding compartments have been closed off to prevent the sinking of the ship. Sadly for me, it did fuck all. It just means that I'm well and trapped here. Luckily, there's enough food and water to last me a few weeks. I mean, I hope at least. In all honesty, the main reason why I'm writing this down in some scraps of paper is to keep myself calm. See, if I start to panic, I'll waste oxygen. There's no way I have enough to use all the food here and the water if I hyperventilate. Entry 2. I managed to find a flashlight and a few batteries, so at least I can see my metallic prison. There's no way the military isn't looking for me right now. Captain must have sent out a distress signal, or it happened automatically. They're on the way to save me as I'm writing this. But as the ship is sinking deeper and deeper, and the loud groaning of the metal around me isn't giving me any hope that it'll be an easy operation for them. For now, all I can do is wait. Of course. Tried banging on the walls and the doors to get some measure of attention, but I guess also panicking. Didn't hear me or something. I mean, they'll notice that I'm not there during the head count. They have to. Maybe the captain even brought a radio to the escape boat. I'll be out of here before I know it. Yeah, enough writing for now. There's so little happening, there isn't much to write about. I mean, maybe I could write a book about this. Become famous like that guy who got his hand stuck in that cliff. Entry 3. Damn, I need to figure out how to keep track of time down here. Some things happen, but it's hard to get a frame of reference. The ship's taken on more water, and it's falling towards the bottom of the goddamn North Atlantic. But I'm still trying not to panic, right? But with the water around me, it's becoming slowly darker and darker. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to manage right now. So pitch black out when I look through my window. It's hard to see out far. If I were to guess, I'd say that ship's about 2,000, 2,500 feet deep. There's still some sunlight coming through, though, but it's not nearly enough for me to see. The ship's still creaking. My little steel room is damaged and all. Water will enter. I'll be fucked. Praying that doesn't happen. Entry 4. Must have been a day by now, right? Heard another loud crash. I'm guessing it was a few hours ago. It's hard to know just how long ago, with the sunlight completely gone from this depth. Either that or it's nighttime. The adrenaline's kept me up for so long, but with that comes the hunger. Eaten way too much of my supplies already. Although on the bright side, I managed to keep myself calm the entire time in order to preserve as much air as I can. Knowing a plethora of breathing exercises are actually helpful. Who knew? Absolutely no idea how long I can last with what I have, and I can't exactly try to open the door either. Can't know the situation on the other side of the door at all, so I only have the air in the room right now. Just hope the rescue mission is on their way already. It's quiet down here. Entry 8. Fuck, this is maddening. You know, waiting down here is so boring. You think that that'd be the least of my concerns, but I feel like I've been down here for days. No changes, no sounds. I haven't begun talking to myself, you know, just to hear something other than the creaking of what's presumably left of the hull. I've counted inventory 100 times by now. Found some flares. Thought about using them to start a fire, but it would just waste the precious oxygen in here. Though sometimes past, I'm not feeling lightheaded, right? I keep movement to a minimum, and the cabin's completely dry. There is, however, a problem with the cold. You see, like, no sunlight coming down here to warm the water. It's definitely been a few days, you know, at this point. So I must be below the level where the light can reach me. Cabin's become increasingly cold. Found some blankets. I'm using them to keep myself warm. I need to resort to using flares if this keeps up. And there's no point in saving oxygen if I freeze to death down here. The rescue's still coming. Right. Entry 10. Yet another problem to add to my increasingly big pile of shit. So literally, this time, where am I supposed to piss and shit? I mean, I can't go to the goddamn bathroom. I chose a random corner in my cell, which began tilting afterwards due to some fucking oceanic current or something. So the shit smear is spread nicely around the goddamn room. On top of that, the can I was using to piss in also fell right over. This place smells. It feels gross. For fuck's sake, guys, come here and fucking rescue me. I can't do close to anything at this point. Entry 13. Please, guys, please come soon. I can't stand it here anymore. One of the pipes began leaking, and it hasn't stopped. It's constant dripping now. Feels like Loki when Odin finally had enough of his shit, punished him by chaining him underneath a snake so that it could drip poison on his bitch ass. And the only two differences: firstly, I don't have a wife to catch the drops and make it stop making the noise, and two, I'm innocent. Okay, I did nothing to deserve being down here. What did I do? Tell me, I'll stop. Just let me out of this watery prison. Just drip, drip, drip. I'm losing my fucking mind. It's been going on for days. I haven't been able to sleep at all because of it. It's cold. I'm miserable. There's nothing to do except write, but there's nothing to write about. Entry 15. I don't think they're coming anymore. I only have a few sets of batteries for my flashlight, so I've been using them extremely sparingly lately. I found the box. Said the flashlight should last about 55 to 60 hours on low, which is what I've been using and doing the math in my head with some pretty heavy guesswork as well. I came to the conclusion that I've been down here for nearly 2.5 weeks. Give or take a day. There's still plenty of food, there's water. I think oxygen, but what if they don't find me? What am I holding on for? I feel lonely out here. Back on the ship, I used to love staring at the night sky on deck, the stars above you, the ocean. It gives off a feeling of immense loneliness. But it's a feeling that you welcome if you're on a ship. You're always surrounded by people, constantly in communication with them. The nights on the deck were amazing. Up north here, you could see the aurora borealis in winter. Well, that was some months ago. Now though, now I miss the constant chatter. The people surrounding you are good ways of distracting you from how truly quiet the ocean actually is. I mean, sure, when you wanted to sleep back on the ship, you'd complain about the sounds of waves hitting the hull or the wind rushing outside, but compared to the people, it may as well not exist. Now I'm here. Alone. Only sounds I hear are the currents hitting my prison, but it's usually drowned out by the dripping. Goddamn dripping, it's maddening. Entry 18. Who knows where I am? I can't have drifted too far as I sank. I haven't heard too many sounds that might indicate movement. Pipes still dripping with water. The amount of dry floor space I have is shrinking day by day. Fear the hole's gonna rip at some point, flood the entire room with that freezing water. I made a fire by lighting some wood from the crates with a flare and to keep myself somewhat warm. Doesn't do much. It's enough to make for some relative comfort. If only I could sleep. Constant dripping sounds keeping me awake most of the time. I feel like I haven't slept for days. My only fear is I run out of oxygen really soon if I keep the fire going. I'll only use it when it's too cold to bear. Entry 19. A sound. I hear a sound. It's some clicking noises that sound like the Geiger counter you hear in a Fallout game. I don't know what it was, but at least I'm not alone, right? I actually forgot what it's like to hear something aside from the dripping and the sounds that I make. It sounded far away, but the creature must have been huge. Maybe like a whale of some kind or something. But I'm not alone, right? That's the most important thing here. Couldn't possibly imagine what it's like to hear nothing but your own heartbeat and a constant dripping. What makes it worse is the feeling of being alone. So alone, in fact, that I began speaking to the dripping sound. Even giving it a fucking name. Mr. Drip. I feel like that man from Castaway, right? But at least he had light. I'm fucked. And Mr. Drip is an asshole who doesn't know when to shut up. Entry 22. Whoever said stare into the abyss will stare back. Never truly had to stare at one. See, the fear of the dark isn't actually fear of the dark, but instead fear of what's inside that darkness, right? So let me tell you, I've been staring at the darkness outside my little window for days, trying to look for any sign of life ever since I had heard these sounds a few days ago. I don't know what to expect, but I welcome anything at this point. See, the Norse used to have stories about the Kraken. On old maps, they used to say, "Here be dragons," referring to the middle of the ocean, how they're uncharted territories. Even in the Bible, they talk about Leviathans in the Old Testament, right? I'm not asking for any mythological creatures or legends, but I'd like something.
With TaxAct, you get your maximum refund.
Ah, commercial. No one wants to think about taxes right now.
For all I know, there are fishes, there's sharks, there's squids, or any other type of creature just a few feet away from my only portal into the darkness outside my cabin. And exactly due to that darkness, I can't see what in the abyss is staring back at me. I'm no longer afraid of what could be inside the darkness. I'm afraid that there's nothing. Entry 23. Dripping sound is speeding up. In addition, the metal surrounding me keeps groaning under the stress. Fear I don't have long before I run out of supplies, or I'll be crushed by the sea. I've had nothing but time here to think about what would be a worse way to go, you know? On one hand, you have wasting away. My body's slowly losing all its strength to the point where I can't do anything anymore. So think about food or water or sleep. In reality, it wouldn't be that different from what I'm currently doing anyway. On the other hand, there's drowning, or dying of the pressure. And I have no idea what would kill me first if there were to be a small entrance to the cold outside. At least I imagine that if it was the pressure, it'd be fast. I mean, same as dying in space, right? Except the opposite. Kind of like an implosion, maybe. Drowning, though, that would be horrible. The feeling of needing to breathe, but only getting more and more water stuck in your lungs must be painful beyond all description. Thinking about this makes me realize there truly is no way out of here. At least I'd like to get it over with quickly. Entry 27. At some point in this, one cannot help but conclude that the rescue's no longer coming. You know, I've suffered enough for a lifetime, and if there is a hell, it can't be worse than this. I'm Samuel Rodriguez, 24 years old, from Tampa, Florida. I joined the U.S. Navy back in 2012 to pay for college. Never once did I expect to be sent to the North Atlantic, and never, and even less so, than I have that ship sink and leave me stranded at the bottom of the fucking ocean for over 4 weeks, alone. The best way to describe my predicament: the ocean makes you feel alone and helpless. We weren't meant to traverse the ocean, much less be underneath the waves. I was never afraid of the water or of the sea. When I was a boy, my father took me out to sail more times than I could count. And I was always a good swimmer, but if I make it out of this alive, I swear I'll never touch the sea again in my life. I'm done with it. The sea, the ocean, they can fuck off. You know, aside from my immediate family, I won't be missed. A few friends, sure, but nothing close. Didn't have a girl back home either. Went on a date with one, though, and before I left for the Big Blue, I didn't even like her. I just didn't want to be alone. And in hindsight, I should have listened to my mom. I should have gotten a trade job. It would have been boring, maybe, but at least I didn't have to go into debt or die at the bottom of the goddamn ocean to pay for fucking law degree. If these notes are ever found, let my parents, Carlos and Linda Rodriguez, know that I love them, and that I am proud to be their son. I know that they did their best for me, and for that, I can't be more grateful. Entry 28. Yeah, I've been thinking. It's been a few hours since my last entry, and I'm writing this by fire. I've narrowed down what caused the ship crash in the first place to either a drift, ice, or sea quake. If it is the former, then it's just a huge fucking cliche. Does my life really come down to an extra in Titanic? I'm afraid so. Unless I forgot to write it down, there weren't any aftershocks, so a sea quake seems unlikely. Maybe sea quakes don't have aftershocks like earthquakes do. Well, it shouldn't be that different. Hard to tell from up there. All I remember clearly was a crashing sound. Ship rocking, alarms going off. I thought about those minutes a million times the past few weeks. Storms aren't that uncommon in the North Atlantic either. Maybe it was that. It was cloudy and misty. Winds there nonstop. I can't believe I even started missing that cold that me and my mates on the ship always used to complain about. Entry 29. Food's running low. Water ran out just yesterday. I'm using the fire to try to boil the seawater and make it drinkable, but, it doesn't work. I'm thirsty. It well and truly is the end of the road for me. Air's getting thinner. Ocean makes everyone powerless. If I want to go out on my own terms, I still have that box cutter I used to open the boxes. Place these notes in a container along with my dog tags, if it's ever found, Please give them to my parents, but I'm not counting on it. Die, useless death, miles under the sea in the pitch black darkness of the fucking ocean. I hate this place. Can't believe this is the end for me. We weren't made to be out here. At least in the forest or in the desert, you can still move, right? You can still hear. You think of something, some way to survive longer than this. People have been living in those places for millennia. Out here, though? Out here, they said the Vikings were the first to sail to America on relatively small ships compared to what Columbus used. I can't imagine how they did it, let alone survive one storm in those ships. You say the ocean's the biggest graveyard of the planet for a reason, and I can't agree with those people more. Some scientists would kill for the opportunity to study the life around me, but for as far as I can tell, there isn't any. I should have stayed back home in Tampa. I miss my friends and my family. I miss going sailing with my dad. Dumb arguments I had with my mom. I miss how my uncle would drop by whenever he pleased just to get some coffee and then to move on with his day like usual. This isn't the type of loneliness you can just get out there in the world. It's something that I can't fully describe using my notes. No matter how you would try to simulate it up there, it won't be the same. It's not something I'd wish upon my worst enemy. Okay, this is it. My final act of defiance against all this. I may not have been in control during any of this, but I survived out here on my own means, and I'll die by it. Signed, Samuel Rodriguez. Eric Michaels didn't like the dressmaker's dummy as soon as he laid eyes on it. Then again, he was already prepared to hate anything his wife Sarah brought home from the Van Draven house. If ever there was a haunted house, a truly haunted house, The Van Draven house was it, the site of both multiple murder and suicide. It sat overlooking the village like some broken idol for nearly 300 years. The place was cursed, damned, and Eric Michaels wanted nothing to do with it. And he sure as hell didn't want anything from the decrepit wreck in his home. But when Sarah had heard there was going to be an auction there, she had promptly lost her mind and immediately called up her friend Marcia, arranging to meet at the Van Draven estate promptly at 8 the following morning. Eric would well imagine them both sat outside the front gate like a couple of vultures, decked out in their best summer dresses, just waiting for the poor auctioneer to open the doors so they could sweep in, pick over the fallen carcass of the Van Draven house. In the end, she had returned with only 2 purchases, a dress.
I will be right back, chat. And I stretch my legs a little bit.
Dressmaker's dummy and a dusty set of crystal-cut wine glasses that Eric told her that he would never drink from. She had laughed at him then, calling him a superstitious fool before patting him fondly on the cheek and returning to the meticulous cleaning of her newfound treasures.
Thank
Eric
you,
sighed
Kay.
and left her to it. It was all very well for her to call him a fool, but she was an out-of-towner from up-country, as the locals were fond of saying. Eric had been born and bred in Mavagezi. He had heard the stories passed on from generation to generation, had gathered in tents on many a Halloween night, and listened with terrified fascination as his friends and sometimes their older brothers told them gruesome stories of Lucas Van Draven, who had slaughtered his wife, unborn child, and even his new servants, before throwing himself from a nearby cliff into the dark waters of the Atlantic. Stories of the Jonas family found dead in the basement of that house, their bodies twisted as if by some terrible force. She had never scurried past the house as a child, walking home alone from school as the sunset made the cracked and shattered windows burn with a seemingly evil intent. Yes, the Van Draven house was as much a part of the village as the fishing boats in the harbor and the summer people who came to visit every year. One day, he supposed, when the old place became decrepit enough, they would pull it down, and then all the evil things inside would rest. But for now, it still stood a monument to the madness, a madness that had now spread to his home. The first real argument started when Sarah moved the dressmaker's dummy into their bedroom. Eric had seen the god-awful thing stood in the corner of the large bay window next to Sarah's sewing machine, and had promptly flipped out. There was no way that he was getting even 1 minute's sleep with that ugly-looking thing looming over him, but Sarah was having none of it. The whole thing devolved into a shouting match where Eric threatened to sleep on the sofa till that damn thing was gone, and Sarah storming out, telling him that he was welcome to it. She had left him sat there on the bed, fuming, wanting to scoop the fucking thing up and throw it down the stairs, but not quite daring to do so. Instead, he stood up and he slowly crossed the room, wondering what the hell she saw in something so ugly.
Me anytime I talk to Taper.
Kind. Legless, armless. It was nothing more than a headless torso impaled on a tarnished brass stand. The material covering the body looked to Eric like a light hessian, torn and ripped in many places. The overall feel of the thing was one of age and neglect. Curious now, he slid off the bed down to his knees and peered underneath, looking for a date or even a maker's mark. What he saw there caused him to recoil in horror. The underside of the thing was covered in a dark maroon stain that could only be blood. Old and dry, but blood nevertheless. The bottom of the thing was covered in it, drenched in it. Reaching out with a trembling hand, he touched the stains and was suddenly falling. The room spinning, disappearing as if he was being pulled down by some black tunnel. The room was gone, replaced by something else, somewhere else. All about him burnt candles, hundreds of candles and blood. There was blood everywhere. It lay in puddles upon the hardwood floor, ran in rivulets down the walls. Even the ceiling dripped with a crimson rain, splashing, hissing where it made contact with the flickering candles, filling the air with its choking scent. Reaching down with a hand that was no longer his own, he pulled 2 wooden knitting needles from the abomination that lay dead at his feet and span about. A woman was climbing to her feet, quite naked and covered in blood.
What?
"The master," she cried. "Oh, Lucas, what have you done to our son?" Again, that terrible hand reached out, grabbing the woman by the hair and thrusting the needles into the soft flesh of her throat. She staggered away, gurgling blood, gushing from her mouth as she tugged at the needle buried deep in her throat. Slipping, she cried out, grabbing a nearby dressmaker's dummy, clinging on for dear life, pulling it at her, raking it with her nails as she pulled it down on top of her, pinning her beneath. She reached out, begging, pleading, but he was going away now. Back into the blackness. Back to before, to now, to here. To this place. With a cry, he opened his eyes and yelled out in disgust. He was holding the dressmaker's dummy, holding it tight to his chest like some terrible dance partner. Thrusting it away, he backed up, trying to look everywhere at once. Dizzy, disoriented, he tripped over the corner of the bedroom rug, crashing to the floor, his head hitting the radiator with terrible force. The pain was blinding.
It sounded like that hurt.
Vision red, then mercifully he passed out into blackness. He awoke 2 days later with 14 stitches and a bad concussion.
That made me think of a... So I'm very clumsy, as most people that know me will know. And back when we lived in our first apartment, me and Taper were play fighting and just roughhousing, just hanging out with each other. And somehow, I was in our bed, and I was like, I fell on my back. And when I was at the end of the bed, and I like spun, and then I hit the floor hard as hell. I knocked the wind out of myself. And for a good second, Taper was like, "Are you good?" Thought I was dead. I was just winded. I winded the hell out of myself. It was funny. It hurt so bad. It was our only off day when we were working at the hardware store, so it was fun. We were being really goofy, and that hurt us hard. Like I remember like the wind just leaving me altogether. It was so funny.
Sarah had found him unconscious on the bedroom floor, his head laying in a pool of his own blood, and had immediately called for an ambulance. He had only awoken once in the back of the ambulance as it rushed him towards St. Austell's General, but his words had been slurred and nonsensical,
if you say so.
Blood before he passed out again. But now he was awake, doing well. His doctor had told him that
we're goofy like that. We like to play fight. We'll
after a few days of observation,
get Nerf guns and shoot each other. Not as much lately, just because depression. But yeah, I'm still gonna call you.
Only broken by meals and Sarah's.
I'm a bean. I am not frisky.
Nighttime, he would lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering
I can't be this kawaii and frisky. Like, yeah, I have teeth and they omp, but they're tiny omps.
She would think he'd hit his head too hard. Besides, she would never believe him, and who could blame her? He barely believed it himself. He knew only one thing. The damn thing had
even
to
beans can
how to get rid
mash
of
it to
that
bean
was
paste. What?
He was still pondering that.
What? No making bean paste. Isn't that just?
Eric was standing outside the hospital entrance,
wait, isn't that what you put on burrito? I'm sorry, my brain.
Much to the annoyance of the on-call duty nurse at reception, as he tried to take shelter from the pouring rain.
I'm trying to make this
Sarah
dress look almost like,
over an hour ago.
I don't know, like it's light, because like these characters are supposed to be like blacklight style.
The house, but the phone was engaged.
I don't know.
He tried 2 more times with the same results before trying.
I'm trying to make this dress not look like a sheet. That's what. Don't confuse me. I get confused easy. You know this.
He leaned heavily against the side of the building. After a few deep breaths, he quickly dialed the number.
I want burritos now, thanks.
Helen Daniels. Thankfully, she answered on the second ring, and was more than happy
oh,
to
wrong
knock on
side.
the
That's
door
not where the
to see
line
what Sarah was
goes.
up to. No.
As it would dip in a little bit there because our other leg is more forward.
Michael stood there, sweating and listening to the silence.
At least that's the effect I'm trying to give.
But in less than 5 minutes, Helen was back telling him yes, the car was still there, and no.
Confused? How did you get confused?
Yes.
Exactly.
Eric hung up on Helen before she could start asking questions.
I get confused even by myself. Like, I'll be mid-sentence and be like, what was I talking about?
He paid the taxi driver and
what?
turned to face
What
the
was
house.
What was I
Just like
talking
Helen
about?
said, the car was still in the drive, and the house
I
was
get
in the
very
middle of the
confused.
kitchen.
That's why I have this as
Both the
a
upstairs
emo.
and the downstairs lights switched on. Feeling a little more relieved, Eric tried the front door and, finding it locked, just like
Keep up
Helen
with the
said,
comments.
he dug in his pocket
I
and pulled out the
can't.
keys.
I
Looking
has
towards
the
he opened the door to
stupid.
the hall and suddenly stopped. His wife's name was on
I has
the
the stupid.
The whole phone was hanging by its cord, gently swinging back and forth.
I mean.
Sarah's handbag
Hey,
was lying on
well,
the floor,
they're
contents
okay.
scattered and strewn all about the stairs.
Oh god.
Jesus, God, the stairs. The stairs
God,
were
this
covered in blood. It was spattered all over the banister, slowly running down the wall in rivulets, soaking into the carpet beneath. Hitching hardly able to breathe, Michael staggered back into the porch and vomited noisily into the corner.
Ew.
He stayed that way, holding onto the wall, sweating, shivering, until his stomach stopped its twitching and heaving for a moment. He considered just leaving. No one could lose that much blood and survive, but if there was a chance, even a small one. He tried not to think as he ascended the stairs, feeling the blood squelch under his feet. On the landing was one of Sarah's shoes. It lay on its side and was filled with blood. Eric's nerve broke. Then he turned to run, grabbing onto the sticky banner to stop him falling headlong down the stairs.
Switch
He was only halfway down when he suddenly stopped, reeling back.
Listen.
There was a woman.
I do not have possession of the brain cell today. I didn't pay my subscription.
Hole in her throat. Michael screamed as he recognized the woman from his terrible vision. He tried to move, to run away, but he was frozen, unable to move. The woman started up the stairs. Her eyes
I hear
glittering
kitty.
like black jewels from the deep sockets of her eyes. Michaels looked on in horror as she smiled up at him, revealing rotting teeth from which dark blood now began to ooze. Letting out a cry of terror, his paralysis broke and he turned, fleeing up the stairs, past the bedroom door, meaning to lock himself in the bathroom, but suddenly she appeared right in front of his face. "Our son!" she screamed, spattering his face with noxious blood. Terrified, half-blinded, he scrambled backwards, trying to wipe her vileness from his face. Screaming, she lunged forward, shoving him hard in the chest, sending him crashing through the bedroom door and onto the floor. His already battered head glanced off the bedroom table, and for a moment, the world darkened and he feared that he would pass out. Groaning, he raised himself up onto his elbows, trying to look everywhere at once, but the doorway was empty. Sobbing with relief, he clambered to his feet, ignoring the throbbing in his head. Suddenly, he was sure that she was behind him.
When did you stop subscribing?
Listen. He spun around, his hand held high in a warding off gesture, but the woman was not there. Only his wife, Sarah. For a moment, Eric Michaels was not sure what he was seeing. Then he began to laugh. The laughter turned into a scream, and the scream a shriek, as he clawed at his face, at his eyes, desperate not to see, yet unable to look away. The dressmaker's dummy stood in its usual place, but now a bloody, crumpled figure lay at its feet. Bone and sinew gleamed wetly under the merciful glare of the overhead light. The torn and battered body would have been unrecognizable except for Sarah's head, where it now sat atop the shoulders of the dressmaker's dummy. Her eyes rolled back to white, her blood-covered mouth wrenched open in a silent scream. The blood from the ragged stump of her neck ran down onto what was left of her tattered skin, which had now been stitched and sewn with crude stitches onto the dressmaker's dummy. As he looked on with horror, the whole thing began to vibrate. The empty arms starting to
You had to
twist
pay
and
extra for
turn,
that.
reaching out towards him. Still screaming, he started to back away. He heard laughter, then, not with his own ears, but echoing around the broken vaults of his mind. And suddenly realized Sarah's not poor dead lips were writhing, showing her bloody teeth. Her eyes now watched him, glaring at him as the vibrations grew stronger, getting closer and closer. The police found him there a few hours later. After an anonymous call, raving and ranting,
You know people use
his mind
hamsters on a
broken,
wheel.
cradled the head of
What
his
the
poor little
fuck?
wife in his arms.
Poor hamster.
As for the dressmaker's dummy, there was no sign. In the Van Draven house, time did not stand still. It crawled and undulated. In the library, ancient books tumbled from wooden shelves. In the
I've been
hall,
liking using this adding grain effect because it kind of looks like
scrabbled
glitter.
on the winding staircase.
Even though I don't like glitter in person, it does look cool in drawings.
An ear-piercing scream followed by breaking glass, then stillness. In the silence, a grandfather clock ticked, and the house waited, and waited, and waited. This is not an easy story to tell. Just thinking about what happened still gives me chills. Lately, I've been seeing a therapist to talk about what I saw, about what lives amongst us humans. It lives within the deepest depths of the ocean. However,
I want to keep
nobody
using
seems to
the
believe me.
indigo, but I know I'm
Because
gonna end up using a
everything
lot
I
of pink
saw
for
and
the
saw
slime.
tells me that
But I don't know if I should make the
my mind
pentacles
making
indigo
up these
as well as the
thoughts that
shoes, or should I like make them that
aren't
off
truly
pink
real.
that she's also having, or I could make them that gray. The gray doesn't
I
show
think
up
it's
that
that.
much in the original
In
for
hopes that you,
jewelry. Speaking of jewelry, I gotta make
whoever,
sure to forget the color in the jewelry.
will believe my story.
Mm-mm.
Here it is. I've been working as a marine biologist for quite some time. A few years, to say the least. I used to love everything about the ocean and was so mesmerized by it all. The glistening water, the plants, the sea life, even the size was all the more reason on why I became a marine biologist.
I'm just keep an eye on the troublemakers.
It was the middle of October, and a higher up from my research team gave me a call about a new unexplored region, somewhere off the coast of the Pacific. Now, you may think somewhere so far out in the ocean may have made me decline the decision to go and explore such vast open areas, but no. In fact, just the thought of the idea made me ecstatic. I accepted the offer. I made the arrangements, and I quickly set off. The research team consisted of 4 people: Mike, Liz, my best friend Jackson, and myself. Together, we've explored all kinds of places, discovered the most bizarre set of animal life, and even became the first group to do a deep-sea dive inside the Mariana Trench. We were truly a fierce team, and every dive we took, every exploration that we've set out on, it was all done with little to no fear. I always have been fond of the ocean, yeah, but I can't recall a time where I was actually scared of it. That is, up until now. We set off early morning, wasting no time at all to get to our destination.
There's plenty of reasons to be afraid of the
So-
ocean.
So what do you think is out there? Dunno. New species, maybe? Mike and Liz loved to discover new types of animals, while me and Jackson were more fond of the plant life. If so, let's hope nothing big enough to eat us, says Jackson, approaching the side of the boat. He gazed out at the open body of water, watching the city slowly disappear from our view. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. Smell that? Fresh air of open adventures, said our captain, cutting off Jackson as he spoke. Now, let's not try to be out here for too long, understand? It's an area that we don't know of. We all agreed, and began making plans on what specific things to keep an eye on. Well, being so far out, there's obviously not going to be any type of ground level whatsoever, and chances of us even getting an inch close to it is very slim. Mike's right. We should have the 2 of us search for unknown species near the surface, and the other 2 explore deeper, says Jackson, caressing the lining of his jaw
How
as
did
a
that
sign of
happen?
thought. It was no surprise that Mike and Liz would be together. They were practically partners in crime.
There.
How about me and Jackson dive down? Evan and Liz, you guys stay at the top. It was surprising to all of us. How about me and Jackson dive down? Evan and Liz, you guys stay at the top. This was surprising to all of us. Why the sudden change? I questioned. glancing over at Liz.
Hydrate.
I don't know. Just thought we'd swap our partners for once, yeah? Jackson put his hand on my shoulder. Idiot. We're all partners here, but I guess switching it up a bit wouldn't hurt. Liz approached me with a cheerful look. Then it's settled. Let's make this a great expedition. Time went by pretty fast, and it was finally time for us to take our dive. As I approached the deck, Mike and Liz already had their gear on, and Jackson was just about to dive in.
You a thirsty butthole.
Come on, hurry up. Put that last little bit of gear on, let's go. Mike sounded so excited. More than usual, in fact. Yeah, just give me a sec. After finally putting on the last bit, I hurried over to the side of the boat. Jackson and Mike dropped down first, then Liz. However, before I could get my chance to touch the water, our captain rushed out. Pick up signs of a storm on the radar, which is quite odd. Didn't see any type of signs of a storm approaching until now. You guys better hurry back. Boom. A nice-sized wave hit the blind side of the boat, sending me flying off into the water and pushing the boat into the others. Me flying off into the water? I hurried and put on my mask as the power of the wave forced me down under. I watched Mike and Jackson get pushed back further and eventually dragged down by the follow-up of more waves. I grabbed Liz's arm before she could get pulled away any further. We both swam up. Jesus, Captain, are you... Oh my God. What is it? I followed Liz's eyes up and saw a giant, monstrous wave approaching us, ready to crash down right on the boat. Captain! The sound of water crashing and flowing in all sorts of directions snapped me back. I tried to keep calm, but in all my years, I've never been in this type of situation before. Liz.
What?
Where's Liz?
Why the grumpy face?
I looked around, giving myself a headache due to how fast I was turning my head. Crackling. Evan, I'm right here. The radio sounded distorted, and Liz was almost unrecognizable. Liz? Liz, can you hear me? What the hell just happened? Questioned Jackson over the staticky radio. We got hit.
Why grumpy
I'm too far under to
faces?
see the boat. Okay, let me just try contacting him.
What did I do?
Jackson?
What did I do this
You there?
time, at least?
Jesus, Evan? Please tell me you're seeing what I'm seeing, said Liz, her voice sounding shaky. Confused, I looked around, and to my horror, I saw it. It looked like the edge of the world. Just how deep were we? The ground ended off in a completely straight line, and beyond that was nothing. Nothing but pitch black darkness. What the hell is a cliff doing here? Mike? Oh my God, I thought I lost you,
What?
said Liz in worry. Nah, still here. Jackson? Evan? I'm here. We lost comms with Jackson. Wait. I think I see him. Look down to the edge. Me and Liz both looked down and saw Jackson, slowly moving off of the edge. Jackson? What the hell are you doing? Get back up here now! I tried to stop him. We all did.
I didn't drink a
Listen.
pop. I have one of my hydrate
I don't know
bottle
what happened to
body
me.
armor waters in here.
I still hear the words in my head, the final words. As Jackson
I drank
slowly
the
came
last
off
of
the
it.
edge, he said something that threw all three of us.
So that way I
see
can
it?
throw the bottle away when I'm done.
It's down there, waiting. Waiting for the right moment. What are you talking about, Jackson? What's waiting? Just come on back. Let's get out of here, please. Jackson let out a small gasp. He says, "Thank you. Thank you for awakening me. You set me free." Then, from a calming voice to the sound of fear, he said, "Oh my God. Guys, we shouldn't have come down here. We aren't alone." Jackson started violently thrashing his arms, trying to swim up and away from the dark abyss. "It's coming! Oh God, it's coming! It's gonna kill us all! We're all gonna die!"
I think I'm gonna go ahead and go with
That's
the
what we
pink,
saw.
but I'm gonna saturate it
A
pink
long,
so that
dark,
I can do a
greenish,
cute
sort of
highlight on.
scaly, long body quickly rushed up. In size, it was
Otherwise, I
massive,
feel like it's too much
about
indigo.
the size of 4 great-sized mansions, but even then, I don't think even that was enough to explain just how huge this thing was. I watched Jackson get swallowed by it whole. The mouth area was so damn large, it took up most of the abyss. The teeth were the size of giant, icy glaciers, and they were very, very sharp. However, that wasn't the scariest part about its mouth. What frightened me the most was the rows of teeth the thing had. In a circular look,
Oh, that reminds me, I need to
I saw 5
update
rows
the
of
VIP because I
teeth
updated the VIP status
Holy
over
shit.
on Patreon.
The creature then took off further away. We watched for what felt like 10
And I
minutes of its
wanted them
body
to
swimming
match
away.
here.
Then from the darkness, I saw 2 giant white lights. Though they weren't lights at
By
all,
the
they were
way,
creatures
if you
with
didn't know,
secrets.
I have a
As its
Patreon.
face slowly approached us.
You can get arts every month.
and it
Or
spoke.
just hang out. or get a thank you
Towards
video and a
deepest
shout out
good.
in my YouTube videos,
You
which I post every
belong.
Monday now.
belong.
I'll be having a new
You
video coming out this Monday,
Been
actually.
abandoned. And soon, you will be forgotten as well. I saw its body make all kinds of curves and rotations in the distance. There seemed to be no end to it. Mike, what are you doing? Liz questioned in
I think
fear.
I'm gonna do the
I looked down
same
to see
with
Mike
the
moving towards the creature.
shoes, but in the reverse to
I
make the
do
heart
not
peak.
belong. I've been
That's
abandoned.
that's a thing.
I will soon be forgotten.
Like there's rules to this, but I don't know.
I am.
I've gotten the habit of saving the eyes for
nothing.
last, but I guess it's kind of pointless since she doesn't really have
Those Mike's
pupils.
last
Since I
words
decided I didn't like
as I
pupils,
saw him move ever so slightly towards the creature, almost as if he was being pulled into it.
just
I
because
looked
it
at the
looks
creature
nicer on
its
a
mouth.
speed
Its
paint.
mouth was open. It's stretched so far out that it could fit multiple of our boats into it. And
I don't
as
know.
I stared, I felt
It could
myself
glitterly,
something.
oh my god, words.
I
Glitter, add glitter
did not
effect to them,
belong.
so that way
The same
I
words
can't
said
talk.
by Mike.
Let me just
I
stop.
quickly forced myself to turn away. Liz, turn away now. She was nowhere to be found. I looked down once more and saw her, repeating the same words as Mike and slowly moving towards the creature's mouth. No. I wanted to say something. Believe me, I did, but I just couldn't. I knew I wouldn't be able to get through to her, and I knew what was going to happen if I stayed any longer. I quickly began to swim up as my heart pounded inside my chest. Please, please let me make it. In the distance, I saw the boat slowly sinking down to the ground. God, no. The surface slowly began to appear. Just a bit more. Then, after what felt like forever, I finally broke the surface of the water and began to swim faster. Faster than I've ever swam in my life. I don't know what direction I was heading in, but I didn't care, just as long as I wasn't in the same direction as that thing. I didn't even think to call it a creature anymore. I think I swam for about 15 minutes before my arms got tired, and my legs began to give out on me. There was nothing in sight, and I soon gave up hope. I laid myself back and I floated. As I did, I began to have flashbacks. Flashbacks that went back to when I first discovered the ocean, to when my parents first took me swimming at the beach. It all appeared to me as a blur, but it slowly faded into darkness. I awoke inside of a hospital, doctors surrounding me as I tried to keep my eyes open. Stay still. Don't move. Jackson. Mike. The search teams weren't able to find your friends nor the boat. It's lucky they found you. It was then that I had one last flashback, one last image in my brain. It was a vision of the thing that killed my friends. Jackson, Mike, Liz, all long gone. Doctors say I ended up fainting shortly after waking up and became unresponsive. I then went into a short-term coma, one only lasting a few weeks to a month. When I woke up, the hospital room was empty, but the space around me was filled with get-well cards and colorful balloons by my bedside. I was later checked out of the hospital and got to return to my home. Now that I returned back to work, of course not. I'll never go back. Not after what happened. After a while, I began experiencing night terrors, hallucinations every once in a while. And hell, I even developed thalassophobia, the fear of deep bodies of water, just like the ocean. I soon started to feel like I was losing my mind. I started hearing voices in my head, visions of watching my friends be swallowed by that monstrous thing. My entire life felt like it was falling apart, which is why I eventually ended up going to a therapist. But not even he could help. Now I find myself writing this, not knowing when to end it. What I do know is that we're not alone. This world does not belong to us. I don't belong. I've been abandoned, and I'll soon be forgotten. I am nothing. We are not alone. traffic was heavy in downtown Toronto during rush hour. Driving slowly, we made our way along roads crammed with other cars, bike messengers, streetcars, and jaywalking pedestrians. Tall buildings towered over us all around, glass-walled skyscrapers and concrete behemoths. Stopped at a red light adjacent to an alley, the stench of a dumpster overfilled with week-old seafood waste and used diapers wafted over, making me gag. We were on our way to a baseball game, and my brother had found a cheap parking lot online. The only catch was that it was a bit of a hike to the Rogers Center, where the Blue Jays play their games. It was taking forever to get to the discount parking place, immersed in the heavy traffic. At one point, it took us 15 minutes just to make a right turn due to the constant crush of pedestrians and car traffic. It was a hot day. I was getting sick of driving, sick of other people flaunting their utter contempt for every single traffic law, not to mention basic human decency. The idea of 30 more minutes fighting through city streets was too much to bear, and I pulled into the next underground parking garage I saw, telling my brother Noel that I would pay whatever the cost was myself. He looked shocked. This place would be likely triple the cost. But he shrugged it off and said, "Do what I liked." The steel sliding door rolled up on its tracks to let us in. They closed down, shut behind us, drenching the tunnel in near total darkness. I had to stop the car, turning on my headlights to see as we wound our way downward into the parking structure. There were very few signs in the dimly lit garage, only one-way street signs pointing to the left, then to the right, and telling us where to go. All the parking spots were filled near the top, so we continued going down the ramps, deeper and deeper into the parking structure. Cars were parked in every single spot. There was not one to be had as we went down through levels. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Wow, this is starting to get ridiculous, I said, as we entered section T. I've never seen a parking garage that goes down this far, Noel marveled, as we turned another corner and descended even deeper. I started feeling dizzy from the constant turning in circles going down the ramps of the parking structure. Slowing down, I felt woozy for a moment. Then I started driving again, slowly at first. Felt like it was hard to breathe so far down beneath the earth, the air thick and suffocating. "This place is huge," Noel said, as we got down to level X. It was starting to get more and more unsettling. Driving downward in the darkness, it's just a never-ending sea of black cars. Every single one looked identical after a while, like they were mirror images of each other. They had dark-tinted windows, no logo to distinguish the brand, the make, or the model. This place is starting to creep me out. Can we go back? Like, just reverse out of here, man? There's nobody behind you. I tried to go backwards, but found there was a sliding steel door blocking the path going back up. Seemed they were automated to let us go through, but then came back down once we were past. All of them functioned seamlessly on sensors so that we hadn't even noticed them. I imagine
just make
dozens
sure
of
all
them
the
leading
gaps
the
are
way
filled
back up,
in best
blocking
I
the
can
path.
with
Something
Fill
occurred to me
tool.
suddenly. Have you seen any doors other than those? I mean, any stairs leading up out of here? He shook his head. Lines of apprehension furrowed into his face. No, I haven't seen any people down here other than us either. We got out of the car together and tried to lift up the steel door, straining with all of my strength. I tried to pull it up out of the ground. It wouldn't budge. There was no help intercom or any other way of getting a hold of someone running this place. Frustrated, I pulled out the tire iron from the trunk and drove it between the pavement and the door, trying to pry it open. It wouldn't budge. Even with all of my body weight trying to force it upwards, my hands were getting cold and going numb, and I realized it was chilly down here on the lower levels. Much colder than the balmy summer night up on the street. This was the first moment we began to suspect something was really wrong. I mean, still, we had no choice but to keep going downwards, it seemed. There was nowhere else to go. After waiting for what seemed like hours for someone else to come through the door, we decided to try going forward a little ways more. I just hoped at some point the ramps would lead us out and would bring us back to the surface. since that had been my experience with parking garages in the past. I mean, why would anyone build an underground parking facility with no exit at all? I started driving again, my hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. My breaths were coming far too quickly, and my heart was beating fast. I told myself to try to stay calm, try to convince myself that this was okay, this was normal. Suddenly, the letters on the wall indicating which level we were on began to change. After the Z, they stopped being recognizable from our alphabet, or from any other that I had seen on Earth. They appeared ancient, druidic, carved into the stone with precision. Other than that, the place was the same, dim, flickering fluorescence glowing overhead, black cars going on forever as you went down each row. Only the light seemed to be getting dimmer with each level we went down, and it was getting colder too. I turned on the heater, trying to warm up the car, and that was when I noticed my breath was pluming frostily into the air with each breath, as was my brother's. What is this place? Noah asked. I didn't have any answer. The structure made no sense. It wasn't really a parking garage, though. That was becoming abundantly clear. We kept going down, deeper and deeper, feeling like Indiana Jones and his companions exploring a never-ending underground cavern. There was nothing to see, other than rows of black cars, one after another, each level the same until they weren't. At a certain point, the architecture started to look wonky. Now, I don't know how to describe it other than that. It was like a kid had drawn up the plans for it instead of professional engineers or architects. The cars were crammed closer together in places, almost touching each other at strange angles. In other sections, things were spaced far apart. We almost could have squeezed our car in between two others. Almost, but not quite. And even if we could, there was nowhere to go. We had already established that there was no doors leading to stairs anywhere, no elevators or other points of egress either. We went down to the next level. Simoleon. The car's roof almost scraped against the ceiling. The wheels nearly lifted off the ground as we rounded the bend in an uneven ramp. Okay, this place is seriously freaking me out, my brother said, gripping the oh shit handle on his side of the car. Me too, man. Me too. Clearly, going down further was not working. We were just going deeper and deeper into the dark abyss of madness that this place held within it. But getting out of the car was no longer viable either. We were dressed in t-shirts and shorts, since it was a hot summer day. But I can only guess how cold the temperature in the parking garage was at this point. I had the heat cranked up to the maximum, and we were both still shivering. The gas light began to flash yellow, catching my eye. I didn't mention this fact to Noel. Not yet. I didn't want to scare him any more than he already was. We continued going downward, the light now sparse and separated by huge gaps of distance. Sometimes only one defective light was flickering for an entire level, then absent entirely in others. Our surroundings were continuing to get stranger and stranger, no longer resembling a parking garage anymore, but a cavernous hellscape. The darkness and the feeling of suffocating beneath the ground was becoming impossible to ignore. I began to hyperventilate with claustrophobia, feeling that we were on our way downwards towards our inevitable deaths, trapped far beneath the earth, or perhaps something much worse than death. Perhaps we would simply continue driving downward forever into blackness, round and round in spiraling circles. Finally, the car began to sputter and die as it ran out of gas. I wished more than anything at that moment I had driven around with more than just a quarter of a tank. We would have had more time to think of a plan if I had just sprung for a fill-up the last time I had visited the gas station. Noel didn't seem surprised. He'd probably noticed the gaslight too and just decided not to say anything about it. As the car coasted to a stop in the pitch blackness, I looked around. It was pure darkness in all directions. We couldn't even see a few feet in front of the car, despite the headlights still running off the battery. The darkness was getting thicker, more tenacious, and suffocating all around us. I imagined it wouldn't be long before it finished us, invading our lungs and our bloodstreams like a noxious gas, paralyzing us with dread before painfully poisoning us to death with our own terror. The car battery died abruptly, much faster than it should have, and we were plunged into complete darkness. I turned the key back and forth to no avail. The battery was done for. so were we. The sounds could be heard outside the car, sounds of movement, scurrying noises, scratching claws, raking against the steel doors of various nearby automobiles, long ear-splitting screeches getting closer. Something began to bump against the right side of the car, jostling it to the other side as we shivered from the cold and grabbed hold of whatever we could to brace ourselves from what might come next. It felt like something huge was brushing up against the car, like a huge worm beneath the surface of the earth, using these tunnels as passage. For a while, it felt like the car would tip over. As the sound of the thing moved past outside, dragged on and on forever, but eventually it ceased, and the car settled back on its axles. It was silent again in the darkness. Freezing cold, lonely, despite the presence of my brother mere inches away, I felt as if I would die down here. My life began to flash before my eyes as I waited for death to come in whatever form it would take. I remembered my phone suddenly in my pocket. The screen would give off a little bit of light, and that was a relief. It was still a signal somehow, even all the way down here, and just enough battery to type this up and send it out to you all as a warning. If you happen upon the parking garage, the one with too many levels, don't go down any further. Stay near the surface, get out while you still can. And if you see a parking attendant, please tell him we're stuck down here. Help us. Hey there kids, it's me, Mr. Creepypasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I'm going to let you know about the Chilling app. I've talked about the Chilling app before, but I want to let you guys know about it again, because I'm on it, and also because there's a whole bunch of new stories that I've just done for them that came out this month, including a series that I've been really into. I don't get to choose the stories that go on there. I'm going to say that right out. I don't get to choose the stories that go on there. They pick out the stories, which they have picked out some really, really good ones, including a series called The Space in Between that I have been riveted to my seat to know how it ended. And now I know how it ended, but you won't know how it ends unless you go check out the Chilling app. The Chilling app links are in the description down below, and if you go quick, and by quick I mean like, I think it's just like a few more days, so really quick, you can enter to be able to win an Oculus Quest 2 bundle, which includes the Oculus Quest 2, Resident Evil 4, Blair Witch Oculus Quest Edition, The Exorcist VR, and a $250 Amazon gift card. So, I mean, hey, there's really no part that's bad about starting your free trial now. And now, on to tonight's story. As I pulled up in front of the shop, I had to recheck my directions. It was a dingy little hole in the wall stuffed between a Dollar General and a computer repair shop. It looked like it had just existed here since the creation of the first VHS tape. The windows were covered in a thick yellow paper, and the outside was caked in a film of old dirt. The sign on the door said open, but it was barely visible through the dirty window. There was no way this place was what I wanted. When I was a kid, I remember watching a show on cable called Children of Man. As a kid, the premise of the show appealed to me. The show was about kids living in an island out in the Pacific trying to survive day-to-day trials. The producers had gotten 40 kids from all over America, ages 10 to 12, and dropped them off with supplies and instructions on how to survive. The host, Chris Mansworth, was a survival expert, and he would create challenges every day for the kids to complete. There were 4 teams of 10 kids, and the winner of each challenge got something cool for their area of the village. I watched the show religiously as a kid, every Saturday night, right after The Simpsons. The show would come on, and I would be enthralled. I always imagined that I was on the island with them, surviving day to day. The challenges were always neat, too. They had the kids gut and clean their own meat, dig wells by hand, build rafts for the raft race, and make aqueducts so their village could have running water. It was a neat idea. But the show just stopped after 8 episodes. I watched the show religiously as a kid, every Saturday night right after The Simpsons. No new episodes came out, and the station never gave a reason. This was before the internet, and there was no way to check for online updates. So the show slipped off into obscurity, and my 10-year-old self just forgot about it. I remember the show again a few years ago when Mom sent me a box of my stuff from the attic. There was a couple of old VHS tapes in there, and between Batman the Animated Series and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were 8 tapes with handwritten labels that read Children of Man. We had a VHS recorder when I was a kid, and I can remember recording my favorite shows to watch later. I was excited to get to see the old show again, the memories flooding back, and I started looking for a VHS player amongst the tapes in the box. Well, there wasn't one, but a quick trip to the Goodwill and $15, and I had a gently used VCR hooked up to my TV. And I watched all 8 episodes back to back and fell in love with the show all over again. I remember the kids I liked, Robert and Catherine were my favorites, but many of the kids had also been given a lot of screen time, and it was hard not to like them too. As I watched, I found myself wanting to see how the show ended all over again. As I watched the show again, I began to notice, well, something a little darker under the surface. Something I hadn't noticed as a kid. The village was divided into 4 teams: green snakes, bluebirds, red foxes, and brown mice. The teams had mostly been divided up by background, which seemed very divisive to me as an adult. The green snakes did most of the hunting for the village. A lot of their kids had a rural background, while the brown mice did most of the farming and the gathering, because, well, they had come from a farm background. The red foxes were in charge of construction and upkeep. They were the smarter kids, and they worked with the bluebirds, who were in charge of food management and cooking the meals. Every team had a representative who sat on a council. Robert sat for the green snakes, Catherine sat for the bluebirds, Marco for the red foxes, and Charine for the brown mice. As the show went on, it became apparent that Robert didn't trust Marco, and with good reason. Marco and Charine had formed a kind of alliance of their own, though most of it was because Marco bullied her into doing what he wanted. Robert and Catherine had set up their own alliance, and Robert started holding out food to sway Catherine's decisions. The village needed food, and Robert pointed out that he and Catherine were the only ones providing it. Robert and Catherine wanted a fair split for everyone, but Marco tried to split them into a class system that would put his foxes in the higher tier. Robert didn't like that, and it became clear that if Chris hadn't been there, we would have seen a lot more fights. Robert was a big 12-year-old, a stocky bruiser who won battles with his fists most of the time, and Chris had separated him and Marco more than once. Marco was smaller, but definitely had charisma. He had most of the mice and all of the foxes on his side, and I wasn't sure how I missed all this tension as a kid. It all came to a head in episode 6. Marco was caught hoarding food in the Red Fox village, and it wasn't just food.
Commercial.
The teams had been bringing in either. He had been taking the comfort foods from the canteen the brown mice ran for the village and storing them in his hut. Robert discovered this and took Marco prisoner, demanding that he be placed on trial. The whole village was in an uproar, but Marco agreed to be confined to a central cabin until the council could rule on his trial. Chris was setting the whole trial up as an episode 8 draw for viewers. At the end of episode 8, the council found Marco guilty, and the episode had ended with a lot of shaky camera work and the red foxes storming the podium where Marco was seated. And that was how the show ended. The little bell chimed overhead as I stepped into the tiny place. The store looked like a throwback. Sharp-looking rickety shelves that were covered in plastic VHS boxes and thick dust. The shelves held VHS tapes, Betamax, and DVD cases that were arranged neatly amongst the filth and dust. A quick look showed that they were all in alphabetical order, like some ancient library. The shelves fronted onto a glass display case that held murky wonders within. On the counter was a television, an ashtray stacked with old butts, and the greasy store clerk who smiled at me as I approached. "You the one who called about the tape?" he asked, showing a mouth of stained teeth. I searched for months on my own. I had taken to the internet in an attempt to find something, anything that would give me some closure.